Hello, welcome to the Trey Olds Radio Show. Thank you for joining us today. Today, my special guest is actor Mr. Rigg Kennedy. Thank you, and join us in a second. Okay, Rigg, my first question to you is, how did you become an actor? How did your career begin?
I guess as a class clown. When I was a kid, I was crazy about Jerry Lewis. Mm-hmm. And he was just so crazy. I would do Jerry Lewis and get all the attention. And I talked to him like this and said, Melvin, and God, I have a high-pitched voice and all that. And I found out that everybody liked me. So I liked doing that. I started off in a Catholic school, going upstairs from the first and second grade, telling stories about the saints. And because there were like 2 first grades, 2 second, all the way up to the second floor were the 2 eighth grades. And I used to get a lot of chocolate candy, which gave me cavities, and statues that glowed in the dark. So I found that was really a good thing, and I loved going to the movies. When other kids were playing baseball, my grandmother was taking me to the movies, watching Ethel Merman dive into the pool singing with Howard Keel, until I was old enough I was at Boulevard Theater in Waverly, in Baltimore, and then and when I was old enough, I would go to the Saturday matinee, and that would be all kinds of great, westerns and things. I was amazed when Roy Rogers introduced Rex Allen. Roy Rogers rode up on his horse, got off and said, "Hi, boys and girls. I'm here to tell you about a friend of mine, Rex Allen, and he'll be riding up soon, and I want you to listen to him because he's a good friend of mine." And this is Trigger and I say goodbye. He rode off on the horse, and Rex Allen rode up on a horse on the film, and suddenly the theater went dark, and then a spotlight was on the stage where Rex Allen actually came out of the film. It was a phenomenal event, because I thought, and when I was a kid, I even asked an old man, an old gray-haired, must have been a 70, 80-year-old man, about what can I do to get in the movies. But when I was saying get in the movies, I was talking about going up from the stage and entering the film and being transmogrified into film. It was, those are the things that got me into acting. It was the magic of theater, and I remember seeing Rock Around the Clock about a bunch of juvenile delinquents at a high school in New York. And everybody, and then it got into toward the end of the movie, Bill Haley and the Comets started playing 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, dun 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 dun. The whole theater was like the seats were pounding, and everybody was tapping their seats, and the whole place came alive. So those are some of the things that fed me to acting. Wow. I was sort of sucked into it cinematically.
That's when the acting bug bit you. Yeah, that's when the acting bug bit you.
Big time. I never thought of it all this way, but thank God I had a good answer for you. Yeah.
So you started in theater, high school with theater? Yeah.
No, actually, I was entertaining. I was told that when a lot of people were standing in line to buy tickets to see an Oriole game or a football game at Memorial Stadium, that I would be there dancing and entertaining them. I don't remember doing that, but if that would tie in with some of my. And then when I went to visit some cousins who were out in a place called Parkville, Maryland, from Waverly, where I lived. I went down to we were having a look, how kids look around trying to find some fun to do, mm-hmm. And we went to a drugstore, and I made out I was drunk and was trying to buy liquor, and I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. So they really laughed, and I felt good about it, and they were so impressed. It became a family kind of legend that that I did stuff like that. So. It was all in my early days, Right. My early days. And I couldn't wait to go to Hollywood. I had I had two aunts who were my mother's sisters, and they said they just saw a movie, and they saw somebody who reminded them of me. And I said, well, who is it? What's his name? And I found out later it was James Dean. Mm-hmm. So for a while, I thought I was James Dean because but that was an epidemic where a lot of people thought they were James Dean back in the 50s when he died. And his first film was that came on the screen. It was, I think, Rebel Without a Cause and then East of Eden. But so many people were wearing red jackets and all being James Dean in different neighborhoods. It was a very strange phenomena that was occurring, where everybody was actually becoming a rebel or something. They were identifying and relating to Dean. Mm-hmm. And that was another step. And I just couldn't wait to go to Hollywood because nothing else. And then I had a nun who I went to a Catholic school, and I knew my Latin, and my grandmother used to have me paraded around the house when I was there. A lot of times I'd stay with my grandmother, and she lit a candle, and I'd walk around through her house, through the hallway, and sometimes when she'd have guests, she had these old-time curtains called portieres, mm-hmm. and I would, whatever they were doing, I would just interrupt and start saying, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ed Sullivan Show. Tonight we've got Dean Martin singing and Jerry Lewis, and I would be Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, with in the hallway where people were. I would get on people's nerves, I guess, but I just had this great compulsion to want to show what different things I could be.
Yeah. Yes, you started at an early age, and I think that's the best time to get into the industry because you learn more at that age, and you constantly learn more as you get older. I started when I was 13 in radio and voiceovers, and I found it's best to start out early as you can.
Well, did you do imitations of stars, or what did you do?
Well, I didn't really do characters. Everyone told me I had a unique voice. My voice is very high-pitched and very, it's an interesting voice. So I just did narrations and just started doing, like narrations for advertisements and just...
And did you record them? Did you record them to hear them and hear where you to study what you wanted to convey? Did you actually be self-critical and do that?
Yes, I did. I had a little recorder, and I would do, whatever. I would do advertisements or say something for, and then I would replay it and tweak on what I could work on, or if I liked it, I keep it as is, or just tweak on it, and... Yeah. And then, I guess around 14 or 15, I started doing a podcast, the podcast I do now, and I had a friend in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where I'm from, who was a radio host. He said, you have a unique voice, do podcasting and continue to do voiceovers, but, professionally do it online and get with people. And I said, sure, okay, and I did it, and I enjoyed it. I loved it, and then as I grew older in 15, 16, I dabbled in theater, and then still did the radio show, and then I...
Did you do plays in high school and then go on to college?
I did plays in high school, but I didn't go to college, but I did... as I got in my 20s, I'm 22 now, when I started getting 20 and 21, I didn't go to college, I didn't do a course in college or anything, but I did work with some community colleges with their theater department, as an actor, and, that was fun.
Yeah.
My next question to you is, so... You went to Hollywood. How did you get into films? How did you get into films and television?
Let's see. When I got to Hollywood, I went to Hollywood when I was 15, and I moved to Northern California, And my mother enrolled me in the Christian Brothers School, but I'd had enough of Catholic indoctrination at the time, so I enrolled myself in Hiram Johnson High School, where I could be with girls and boys, and not just an all boys thing. And my first Thanksgiving holiday when I just turned 16, and I said, you know what I'd like to do is go down to Hollywood and just spend the weekend there, because I don't really have any friends here, and that's what I'd like to do. So I went down, and I went to Schwab's, because among other places, and there I met my first friend. I had a banana split at the counter. This is where, right at Crescent Heights, where all the movie actors, all the movie stars, Maximilian Schell, Shelley Winters,
Mm-hmm.
they would eat at the booth there. But that was later. But a lot of people went there thinking that's where Lana Turner was discovered. But actually, she was discovered across the street from Hollywood High, where she was a very pretty student, and that's where she was discovered. But I went there, and I got a banana split, and I was wearing a raincoat, I remember. And I had to use the men's room, and I'm sitting next to a man, and I said, "Sir, I've got to use the men's room, but would you tell the waitress not to take my banana split away, because I haven't finished it?" And he said, "Sure." So I went to the bathroom, came back, and I figured, oh my God, my raincoat's still there and the banana split, and I became friends with him. His name was Charles Swain. He was an actor from Chicago, above Chicago, somewhere in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been in a play in New York called Anna Lucasta, which was originally about a Polish girl, and he decided to make it an American, a black American girl. And through Charles Swain, I met Don Devlin, whose son produced the Patriot, starring Mel Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
This was years later, but this was from an earlier contact, actually. And I had done some films, UCLA films, and whatever I could do, the sooner I could dive in and do whatever. Because I then went back to Sacramento, actually, and went to the Elisa Shari Theater Studio, and I learned how to walk like a prince, which didn't really do much for me. I mean, I guess it was really to start letting you know that you got to walk and act like the character, literally. So I remember walking around like a prince, and then I did a monologue from a Brando play called Tea House of the August Moon, playing I guess it was an Okinawan, ladies and gentlemen, very glad to introduce myself. Sakini by name, interpreter by profession, education by ancient dictionary. Okinawa is very different from other country. First of all, in Okinawa is very appropriate to have picture of nude lady in home, but nude lady in home is very inappropriate. So geography is question of geography is question of something. Anyway, that just engulfed me. But I did whatever I could wherever I could, and I found the colleges was a nice place to let them know you were an actor, because they're ready to get their bachelor's or master's in cinema, and so that's where I got some starts, and from there it led to other things. On the thing with Charles Swain, he had introduced me to Don Devlin, who was involved in Anna Lucasta with Sammy Davis, Eartha Kitt, and Charles Swain among the cast of the Polish girl being instead a black American girl. Mm-hmm. And so I met Don Devlin, and one day I would call Don, and I was working on a show I had written about Charles. Charles had a famous saying: "If give a young man a pair of new shoes, and he will probably walk out of your life." And Don got a big laugh out of that. So we I became friends with Don Devlin. He produced a movie that you might know of called The Witches of Eastwick, starring Jack Nicholson and Cher. And I had enough films on videotape in those days, and he was at Warner Brothers, and I took some stuff for him to look at, and he said, "You're a good actor. You're a good actor." And I thanked him, and then he reminded me of that once by sending me a telegram, not a telegram, but an email, saying what I said I meant. So I used to read him some of what I was writing, and I wrote a book of poetry called Rigg Words with a cover by the artist R. Cobb, who was a friend of mine, Ron Cobb. He's the one who created Conan the Barbarian's costumes and weapons, Arnold Schwarzenegger's first film, and he also was working on film with Spielberg. Spielberg admired his work as a political cartoonist, and said, "If you ever want to direct a movie, I'll produce it." And Ron said, "Well, I'm not really a director." And Spielberg said, "Well, if half the writers in this town have your imagination, that would be a very great thing for Hollywood." But he said, "If you have anything," and Ron said, "Yeah, I have an idea about an old boy fishing in a Louisiana bayou." And suddenly he's addressing 5 little glowing creatures. So Spielberg said, "Get an agent. We'll do it. I'll produce it." So at one point, Kathleen Kennedy, his associate, told Ron, "We got to cut the 5 little creatures. That'll cost another $3.5 billion for our budget. We just have to count on one of them." So the movie became E.T., and Ron wasn't very happy with he thought it was a banal retelling of the Christ tale. But Ron's wife said, "Did you make any kind of a deal with Steven Spielberg?" And he said, "Honey, there might be a contract over underneath there, under the couch, under the bed, or because he had a studio, and he was a devoted artist. So, and he wasn't impressed with the movie anyway, after he had written so much to the script and gave it the basis. So anyway, he got to play the doctor who carries E.T. But around that same time, I'm also a poet. So I asked Ron. I said, I'm going to be publishing poetry soon, and I'd love for you to do my book cover. What would you charge me? He said, "Rigg, we're friends. I'm not going to charge you anything." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want a tricycle alighting on a lunar terrain with half a bottle of gin under one handlebar and a melting ice cream under the other handlebar." So about 3 weeks later, I got a call. He said, "Rigg, I got your picture ready," and it didn't have the gin or the ice cream melting, but it had this fantastic thing where the tricycle was landing with an eclipse in the back of it and a glowing orb over it. And a lot of people said, "My God, that's like that reminds me. It's like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. You know, like the big first front wheel is God." I said, "Well, what I had intended it to be is the riddle of the Sphinx. What goes on 4 and 2 and 3. That's man. They crawl on 4 legs, they walk on 2 legs, and then they walk on 2 with a cane as 3 legs." And I said, every astronaut or cosmonaut's first real vehicle, where they're not carried in the womb of the mother, but actually making their own decisions, because even at birth they're put in a baby carriage and then a stroller, and then they finally get a tricycle. So that was what that was about. But he also was involved in Steven Spielberg's thing, and I kind of thought maybe Steven Spielberg had copied it. What's the word? I can't think of the word. It's always on the tip of my tongue.
Plagiarized?
Plagiarized, yeah, that he plagiarized in a way, because people say, "Oh my God, this reminds me of Spielberg's film." But my book came out in 1976, and Spielberg's film came out in 1981 or 82. And because he was working with Ron, I'm sure he had seen the idea. And that shot was, I figured when I saw it, I said, oh my God, he did plagiarize me. So I contacted him, and because people said, you ought to sue. I said, well, I don't want to sue. They said, well, you ought to at least tell him he's got your idea and he should compensate you in some way. So I contacted him. He never returned the calls or anything. I finally sent something to his office. Never really heard anything. They treated me like I didn't really exist because I wasn't a part of the cinema, that reigns in Hollywood. It is monarchy. But in any case, when I saw the silhouette of E.T. with being on the bicycle with the kid in the movie, I thought, oh my God, that kid is taking him back to his planet. But when I finally got to see the movie or something, I saw that it wasn't really about that. But he still used a bicycle in a lunar concept. So, but people, attorneys in Hollywood are afraid to take a case. But I'm sure he must have seen my tricycle to get that shot, because it would have been. It was a shot that they say Rick Birch or Rick Burke, who is known for getting he specializes in getting exactly good shots. I don't know if he was cinematographer. Anyway, I thought maybe Spielberg was plagiarizing, and I still, to some degree, because my book was published in '76, Library of Congress, legit. His movie came out in 1981 or '82, so he had 6 years to see that book. And I know he likes to go to bookstores, and my book was for sale in bookstores. So Rigg Words was the title of it. But I don't know why I'm off on that, other than that that I'm also a poet, and I got as a matter of fact, I'd love to read a poem or two if I can in this interview, if it's possible. But anyway, so the movie made. So at one point, Ron's wife said, "Do you have any contract that you've made with Spielberg?" Because eventually, Kathleen Kennedy, Spielberg's assistant, said this has become so close to Stephen's heart, he wants to produce it. I mean, he wants to direct it. But anyway, so Ron and his wife, they saw the movie. He had a part in the movie, and she found a contract saying that if you do not get to direct this movie, you will get 1 point net. In other words, the taxes are already paid on it. It'll be pure money for you. You'll get 1 point net and $7,500. Was for consolation fee or something for having the directorship removed. But so I said, how much did that pull in? At one point, he said $49 million. So he got so his wife, who also they had a restaurant to keep her busy while he was working as an artist, and she sent she sent the contract papers to Amblin Production at Universal, and about a week or two later, they got a check for $400,000. That was the first check, and they've made over about $60 or $70 million off of 1 point net. That's a phenomenal story. But Stephen later said that it was that the movie was his idea, because when his father had divorced his mother and left the family, he had to invent a creature. So his creature he invented was E.T. So he claims. And I think the movie The Feeblemans that he's got out now, which actually has the girl playing his sister at the time, is the granddaughter of an actor I did a play with, in college, and he disappeared. He came to Hollywood, and we kept missing each other in Hollywood. It was amazing. We knew the same people, but I never went to see any. He was working much more in film and theater than I was. But anyway, that's just an anecdote worthy of. With tributaries and tangents that go into other areas, but I'm always stunned by some autobiography. The crazy thing is, I always believed you got to be at the right place at the right time. I have been at the right place, like with Don Devlin. I didn't know that Don Devlin. Well, I called him and I read him what I had written about our mutual friend Charles, and he said, "Oh, by the way, Rigg," he said, I'm going to be getting out of this business. I said, oh, really? Wow. I'm sorry to hear that. And it's because he had just finished, one of his last films was Witches of Eastwick with Cher and Jack Nicholson. Mm-hmm. So he said that, and I said, I'm sorry to hear it. And he said, but I have good news for you. My son, Dean Devlin, is making his first, I thought he was directing, but I later found out it was producing his first film. And what I think you should do is get a headshot and a resume and send it to Dean Devlin, my son Dean. This is Don's son, Dean Devlin. And he gave me the information and said, send him a headshot. And on the outside of the 8x10 envelope, put, I am a good friend of your dad or your father. And I thought about it, and for some crazy reason, I said, well, I'm sure Don's going to tell him, but I didn't. I guess I should have done it. That was a dumb thing, and I've done a couple dumb things in my life. But I didn't do it, and I had a death in the family, and I had to go back east, and time passed, and when I finally got in touch with his son, his father had died. I didn't know that when he said he was getting out of the business, that he and our mutual friend Charles Swain, back from the Anna Lucasta days about the Polish girl being a black American girl, they were both dying of lung cancer. And I didn't know that. And I used to see him come down. I used to live in Laurel Canyon, where all the rock stars lived, and Tony Perkins and Simon and Garfunkel, and a lot of different people were there. But I used to see him come down Kirkwood. I lived at one point on the corner of Kirkwood, across the street from where Jim Morrison and his wife Pam lived, girlfriend at the time. When Jim was on the road, I'd be dating or being with his girlfriend. We were friends. There was no romance. We were just good friends. But I used to see Don Devlin in his BMW coming down the hill, and he didn't really look real well, but I never put two and two together. It was later, but I should have done what he said, because when I finally called Dean Devlin while he was doing a film in Mexico, he didn't want to take the call, and he had this casting woman, April Webster, tell him come back on the phone and say he's busy directing at the moment, but I'll see you when I come back, and I'll call you. And well, that never happened, But in any case, that I should have learned, because I had heard that John Cassavetes was doing a movie called Brothers. And Brothers was about a quartet of guys who all grew up together, and they were friends for years, and they used to hang out, and they would drink and party and all that. And one of them died, and they said, "Wow, we really are going to miss him. I wonder who's going to be next." Anyway, I didn't know the whole story, but I was at Universal Studios, and I knew that next to the post office across the street, it's no longer there, the post office, and that thing is gone. But they had casting offices because they wanted to keep, as another way to park and not fill up the studio with too many people going through the gates. But anyway, I saw John Cassavetes there, and he's a fine actor. I admired his work. He was a real good, serious, good actor. He was in Rosemary's Baby. He played the husband. Mm-hmm. He had a TV series about playing a detective, but he was very good. And I saw him, and I rapped on the door, and luckily he opened and let me in. And I said, "I'm Rigg Kennedy. I know you're doing a movie called Brothers, and instead of doing music, I thought maybe it might be a nice idea to have my poem be read, because that would include the flavor of that particular scene in any way they could use it." And I'd love to read that poem to you. But in any case, he loved the poem. It had won one of the American Poets Fellowship Society of Philadelphia's special award in 1970, and he liked it. He gave me an empty roll of one of those big round film rolls or tape rolls, and said, "Fill this with all your poetry and bring it back." And for some reason, I didn't do it. that is so crazy, because I wanted to be an actor. He was an auteur director, and that was another stupid thing I didn't do. I think I was maybe drinking a little bit of liquor myself or something, or maybe I have a fear of success, but I didn't do that. That was another break that somebody gave me, and I remember saying I really just wanted him to take the poem. I don't know why he wants to see all my other poetry, but he was an artistic man, and he liked my poetry because my poetry was more like conversation. It was different. And I studied poetry at Johns Hopkins in the writing seminar under Eliot Coleman, but so I write from my heart. My poems come from my heart and the lingo. I knew a poet that I read his books, and I couldn't understand them, and I didn't know what to say, because he wasn't writing for people. He was writing for an ivory tower of intellectuals, and I don't even think they would dig it. Mm. But I won't go castigating anybody in this interview. But in any case, so I kind of screwed up there. And then Frank Silvera, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was. I'm saying this because you always hear, if you want to make it as an actor, you better be prepared and be at the right place at the right time. I don't remember any emphasis on being prepared. I always heard be at the right place at the right time. But I guess you also have to know when is that time. It can happen, and unless you're aware of it, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. So, but Frank Silvera, I played. I can't think. I'm trying to think of the author, but he wrote Marty and a couple other movies, and it was called Bachelor Party, and I played a drunk in it. And then another time he had George Maharis that was there and somebody else, and we were going to do an Edward Albee play called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? No, it was called that was The Death of Bessie Smith. And the director and George Maharis got in a fight, and Frank was there, and I jumped up on a table, and I said, "You guys stop it." And I guess I looked like I was a little wacky doing that, but I figured that was the only way, because otherwise this guy, Ron Gold, and George Maharis were going to be fighting each other. And Frank didn't want that in his theater. It was La Cienega, what's it? Yeah, anyway, it was a theater in La Cienega. I can't think of the place at the moment, but it was a great place where Charles Lawton used to teach classes, and Bertolt Brecht of the German theater. Mm-hmm. And but Frank one time said, we're looking for a lunatic. In other words, that told me what he wanted. But there was a guy there who really idolized Frank, and he eventually committed suicide. But I should have auditioned, but I was afraid the guy might try to hurt me to get the part. Later, he went to Las Vegas. He did a play, and the people for whom he did the play at the studio of Warner Brothers said you should give up acting, and he was very depressed with that, because he took it very seriously. And anyway, he went to Las Vegas, where he and his wife went after their wedding, part of their honeymoon, and he hanged himself with a toaster wire. And I could sense that there was something emotionally off balance with him that was kind of depressing, and that he might, because when he was doing Frank Silvera, he played in Mutiny on the Bounty as leader of the Tahitians. He was a friend of Brando, and he worked a lot in movies with Marlon Brando. And when Brando did Viva Zapata, about the Mexican hero, Frank Silvera played General Huerta, the evil general, and his head was bald, and he had these glasses and a mustache, and he was an excellent actor. He died by. He used to fix the lights in the theater, and he said he was trying to fix his kitchen disposal and electrocuted himself by accident. But anyway, when this guy Maury had committed suicide with a toaster wire, strangely enough, Warner Brothers called him and said they had a part for him, and he would, if he were alive, he might have had a different life. But I say that because the way the actor takes it, I should have done that play. I thought that maybe he would cut my tires or be envious because he had been a part of this theater and done some plays there, and suddenly I came in, and Frank Silvera was asking me to do something, because everybody in theater, they try to give everybody a chance. But so that happened with Frank Silvera, and I wrote a poem called something about the toaster wire taking of the life of the late Morris Schoolhouse. So it's a thing of always being ready when something happens. Be ready and know that this is a chance. Because Frank, the play Frank wanted me to do was a slanted rooftop called The Loudest Noise in the World, and he would have had a lot of agents and important people there, and that would have been a great boost to my career, because I don't just, a lot of people say they're good actors, and I say, why do you say that? And he says, because I can remember the lines. And I said, well, remembering lines is really less than 7% of good acting, because if you know the lines, you might be better off not knowing the lines and knowing the purpose or what the action is, because acting is action. It's just because you can, because if you're not going to be reciting the Star Spangled Banner, you're going to become the Star Spangled Banner or the Eagle or something in that. It's action. So there's different ways of working. It took me a while to get my own method, but I knew that I had a feeling that words weren't, dialogue is good, but it's not something that's on the tip of your tongue. You have to search for it as you go, and that means as I'm talking now, I've slowed down a little bit because I'm trying to find words to explain things. So there are transitions in the flow of speech that just knowing your lines is it's good, but that's secondary, and that should be based on your action, because acting is acting. And sometimes I've been watching Gunsmoke. I think that's a great thing to watch actors, because it's a repertory company. Everybody gets a shot, like in a theater group, everybody gets to play Hamlet, whoever can, or Ophelia, and the same thing is true on Gunsmoke. In those days, I was out partying and doing plays, and hanging in actors' bars or restaurants, or being wherever there might be a job. But that's a contradiction, because here I've had opportunities. John Cassavetes gives me a tape and tells me to fill it with my poetry. Why didn't I do it? When Don Devlin said, send my son Dean Devlin a headshot for the Patriot, I mean, my hair was long at the time. I really should have done that. I don't know why. I'm perplexed, constantly asking myself questions. But I should have moved on these actions. When Frank Silvera said, we're doing The Loudest Noise in the World, we're looking for a lunatic, because it's about two guys hanging out on the rooftop of all places. So it sounds like a very existential situation. But anyway, I didn't do it. So if anybody's listening to this, know that when the time is ripe, know that, and always be relaxed, because the one thing great actors have in common is relaxation. If you're hyped up, that's not the cup of tea they're looking for, So, but anyway, ask me a question so I don't keep on babbling. Or am I talking too much?
No, yeah. You're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. So, I've been close to fame and fortune, and now I'm getting older, and I'm looking in the back, and I'm thinking, I was drinking. Maybe the alcohol told me not to do it, or maybe the alcohol made me afraid. I always had an idea in the back of my head that if I succeed in a film and suddenly my career goes off the ground, where do I go from there? And then I thought, well, maybe death. Death is, maybe I'll die or something. I don't know if that's from thinking about James Dean. He was at the height of his fame, and then he had to go racing sports cars and driving a silver white Porsche against the sunset, and the guy making a right turn before he was speeding down the highway in Southern California, going to the races, whatever. Not that I'm James Dean, but I just thought that I always had a feeling like because that's what I live for. I love the ladies. I love poetry. I love to be around people playing music with their guitar and everybody either reciting or singing a song or something. But at some time, you got to say, hey, I'm here, and I better do something, because if I get too old, I'll be playing old men, and as a young actor, I've got more chances. But I always thought, and I was married to a woman who was a dentist at one point in my life. That was probably a mistake. I probably should have married an actress or a writer or somebody involved in the industry. But I fell in love with a dentist of all people, and she had a patient was in her office talking, and there was a picture of me on the desk. And the agent said, the patient said, he's an actor, isn't he? And she said, yes. Have you ever seen his work? And the woman said, no, but I'm psychic, and I know that if he made it now, his fame would go through his hands and fingers like sand or water. And I went, wow, that's a profound thing, and I remembered it. And I mentioned it a couple times later to my ex-wife, and she said, I don't remember telling you that. And I said, well, no, you told me. And I said, I can't understand why you don't remember. But that's beside the point, because the woman said, I am psychic, she said, and he is going to make it in later years. So I kind of used that as a springboard to keep me buoyant. To keep me floating on the water. And but I have some people who are much more intelligent than I, and was told, like a Zen koan, the two monks, they take a trip, and the Zen master says, what did you do? And one says, oh, we went and we picked up and we delivered what you wanted. And the other one said, we went there, but we had trouble crossing the river, and we had to find a way to do that. So the result of that question and the answers to that question result in which answer was better. And but somebody said, your ex-wife told you what the woman had said when she was when she was in your ex-wife's office. She had delivered the message, and because she can't remember saying it, it's because she had delivered the message and moved on. I contrarily still hold that message as something to live for. And I used to say, I'm not leaving Hollywood. I'm going to stay here until I turn to ashes, and they're going to have to sweep me out of town. Well, as time goes on, I'm getting closer and closer to that. And all the people I used to know and all that, they disagreed with my politics, thinking that I'm somebody I'm not, calling me a name that's a misnomer, but they're wrong, and I can't understand why they would be following somebody who is a prime minister of a certain country and acts like a tyrant, an autocrat, more like a Nazi than somebody like an Einstein they should be following, or a Freud, or a Franz Kafka. If they're going to follow anybody, follow somebody who is positive and optimistic and based on peace and universal understanding rather than something else. So I think right now I am in the loneliest spot in my whole life. This is where all my friends, many friends, have disappeared, and their support at one time was great, but I had thoughts, I saw the world working in a different direction, and I just couldn't bow down and go along with their thinking because it was full of holes and contradictions. So I don't know, but anyway, can I read a poem?
Sure.
Can you read a poem?
Yeah.
For one of my best poems from my book, Rigg Words,